Welcome to Conozca sus derechos, Know Your Rights. This program is brought to you by the Hispanic Bar Association of Central Florida. It is our mission to inform the community of important legal topics affecting our community today. Today, we will be talking about human trafficking. I am Camila Pachon Silva, the Community Relations Chair for this organization. Today, we have two excellent speakers who are experts in the field who will be able to discuss what is human trafficking and how we can combat this in this community. Tomas, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, Camila. Thanks for having me. I wear two hats in the community. One is I'm the founder and executive director of Florida Abolitionists, which is a nonprofit here in Central Florida that combats trafficking through preventative and restorative solutions, which you'll hear about today. My second hat is I'm co-founder and chairman of the Greater Orlando Human Trafficking Task Force.
Okay, and Stephanie, thank you so much for being with us as well. Please tell us a little bit more about you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. I am the Director of Human Trafficking Victim Services with Florida Abolitionists with Tomas, and we launched and created the Victim Services Program that provides comprehensive case management and victim advocacy to primarily adult victims, but also some minors as well.
Okay, and why did you become interested in this topic?
Well, when I was still in school, in college, they did an outreach on campus called The Price of Life, and at the time I was learning about just the statistics that today there's more slavery going on across the nation and internationally than there ever was during the civil rights era, that I was just astonished by that and just really wanted to be a part of the movement against it.
Okay, well, thank you both for being here with me today. Tomas, you mentioned that you're the chairman of the Greater Orlando Human Trafficking Task Force. What is the task force?
The task force is a network, a coalition of governmental and non-governmental organizations that have come together basically to look at all the different areas of trafficking. I have to say we are, first of all, victim-centered.
Okay, and what does that mean to be victim-centered?
Victim-centered means that we are all doing what we're doing in our contribution as stakeholders so that victims can be identified in the community and restored with best practices, and that we make sure that we're really serving them kind of above all our own personal maybe missions and agendas.
Okay, so about the task force, how does the task force work?
Well, the task force works, we have an executive committee that comes together monthly, and from that what has been birthed is we have members now. So if you're an agency, an organization in the Greater Orlando area, which is now includes 8 counties, you can join if you are contributing to the fight against trafficking, whether it's from a service provider perspective, law enforcement, maybe your faith-based group, immigrant rights, a law firm, any way that your agency's mission is directly or indirectly assisting victims.
Okay, so let's say that I work for a nonprofit here in town and I want to be part of the task force. What do I do?
Well, you can go to our website, gohttf.org.
Okay.
And you can, we have contact information, and our director of community development would send them the application and all the information they would need.
Okay, and after you join, what do you do as a member of the task force?
Well, we have different ways to get involved. Some are what we call stakeholders, the member organizations that we vet. Not just any agency can be a part of the task force. Again, you have to be working indirectly or directly in the issue. And so we have, every other month we have a stakeholder meeting where those organizations come together.
Okay.
This may include someone who has now a safe house for adult females, for example, that are getting out of sex trafficking. Other ways, if people want to get more involved, is we have 16 subcommittees.
Okay.
And each of those subcommittees have a chair and a co-chair. For example, our legal advocacy. And if someone is an attorney, maybe they're a law student even, they can join that subcommittee. And that subcommittee is also part of our Speakers Bureau. And we'll be training judges, maybe going to law schools, really getting the information out from the legal perspective on how we can make a difference.
Okay. So Stephanie, do you work under the task force? Or do you work as part of an organization who's a member of the task force?
Yes, I work for Florida Abolitionist nonprofit that is part of the task force.
Okay, and what is your role? What is your responsibility?
My responsibility right now is I oversee 2 interns, and I also provide direct services to victims or survivors of trafficking. So victim advocacy, crisis intervention, and case management. Kind of from beginning, our goal really is to work with individuals from the time that they're initially recovered until they feel completely restored, and whatever that looks like to them, whether that be back in school or finishing a college degree or working and living on their own. And we've just found that having a single face there with them throughout the entire process has really increased success rates.
Okay.
In them just not going back, ending up back on the streets. And just being able to build that trust and rapport with them from the very beginning has been just made all the difference, because sometimes when they're recovered, they identify us as the victim advocates and sometimes a law enforcement officer that has worked with them as well as their only support system. And you just build trust with them just by meeting their basic needs. Because as much of an awful situation as it is, their trafficker was providing them food, clothing, housing, and transportation. Right. And when they're recovered, they're kind of in a panic mode. Where am I going to live? How am I going to eat? How am I going to make a living? And being able to come in and say, there's other ways, like there's resources that we can get you connected with that you know you can move forward with your life, and just giving them that hope, and also asking them, before this happened to you, what were your dreams for yourself? What did you want for your life? What were your goals for your future? And whatever those may be, say, we can try to get you connected with those. We can do our best to work with you through that process, whether that be applying for financial aid for school or helping them build a job resume. So just really from the very beginning of emergency services like emergency housing, shelters, getting them connected with residential programs for their needs. And then after that process, they begin to feel healed in that way, then continuing to work with them to build the skills they need to be successful. Okay. And that's also client-centered, where they've spent a long period of time with a trafficker who has taken away all of their power and control. Right. And part of being victim-centered and client-centered is giving them that choice back. Again. Yes. Okay. So that means that they have the choice of whatever it looks like for them. So it's really they get to choose where we take each time we meet.
So based on your experience, what is that interaction like when you first encounter the victim? You are the first person besides law enforcement, because it's my understanding that law enforcement will reach out to you and then you will be that point of contact. So how is that that first time interaction with a survivor of human trafficking?
I think it's a common misconception sometimes that expecting them to be very withdrawn or meek, and that's not always the case. You see a wide range of different just kind of emotional states and responses, anywhere from being very quiet and not wanting to talk to being extremely angry and defiant. And I completely understand that as well. And most of the time, they may not always identify right away as victims. And that kind of goes with part of the majority of the clients that we see have been controlled not necessarily always by physical force, but by psychological manipulation. So they have been manipulated to actually believe that they're the ones making the choice to do this in their lives, and even though they don't have control over their own money and they're being controlled, they'll swear up and down that it was their choice, it was what they wanted to do. And just meeting them where they're at, not attempting to tell someone you're a victim if that's not how they're seeing it right now, but just kind of planting the seeds and being able to share with them other ways just to kind of work with them with where they're at. Okay,
so Tomas, how do you empower a victim? How do you let them regain that control?
It's really giving them back the power of choice, and that they can, again, what do they want to do? And so we see a myriad of responses. So they may want to go back to family. It may be here in Florida, another state. They may want to go to a residential facility. They may even want to try to live on their own. And so we let them make those choices. We're there with them. They always know that the door is open and they can call us. So it's really giving them the power of choice.
Okay, well, I want to thank you both for taking the time to share all this knowledge with me today. We have to take a short break, but we will be back and we will continue discussing this topic. Don't go away, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Conozca sus Derechos, Know Your Rights, a program brought to you by the Hispanic Bar Association of Central Florida. I am Camila Pachon Silva, Community Relations Chair of this organization. Today we are discussing human trafficking, what it is, and how we combat it in our community. I am here with Tomas Lares and Stephanie Skolciak. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Tomas, we have been talking about the Greater Orlando Human Trafficking Task Force. Can you please share with the community what have been some of the accomplishments of this organization?
Sure. Well, since the Greater Orlando Task Force was initiated almost 2 years ago, there's just been great accomplishments, including we have a wonderful executive committee, which are mostly the founders and the directors. We have 16 subcommittees with co-chairs. Many of them are active and specifically looking at an issue, for example, legislative advocacy, victim services, et cetera. We've also been able to reach an 8-county area of the Greater Orlando and either started a task force or a working group in that area so that community could take ownership of the priorities and the needs fighting this horrible crime.
And is there any relationship at the federal level with any federal entities, Department of Justice?
Yes. We have a relationship with the Polaris Project. They house the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which is the number 888-3737-888. That's the number we ask folks to call if they see something suspicious.
Okay, can you repeat that number again, please?
Sure, it is 888-3737-888.
Okay, perfect.
And Polaris will, when they get a call from that hotline and someone is from the Greater Orlando region, we will get the call eventually. Our lead law enforcement agency, MBI, the Metropolitan Bureau of Investigation, and or Florida abolitionists. So that is one of our federal connections. We're also listed with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services as a task force, and also recognized by Department of Justice and others. So there is a federal involvement.
Okay, thank you. And Stephanie, I know that you have a lot of experience in this area and working with survivors of human trafficking. Do you have any success stories that you can share with us?
Sure. I think just different clients are successful in different ways, and just seeing the transformation in clients from the time that they're recovered and to months later, just in their hope and everything. So we have some clients that are working independently and have their own place to live now. Some clients that I've worked with that are, have applied for school, applied for financial aid and scholarships, and some that have just successfully completed residential programs just for substance abuse and just for working through the trauma and the mental health aspect of just recovering and healing. And so just a lot of different success stories.
Right, because I think there's a misconception that you're going to take somebody out of the life, a survivor, and they're going to come out and they're just going to be a new person, and people don't understand the consequences of being in the life. In your experience, what do you see? What do these victims have to face to be able to get their life together?
That's a great question, great thing to acknowledge. And I try to just remind people that little steps are big steps. So for something that we might take for granted is a huge step for them to take in their life after they have been brought out of that situation. There's a lot of trauma and the psychological manipulation that I feel occurs with a lot of clients is just, it's equivalent to brainwashing, and it's just they have to kind of address a lot of post-traumatic stress and address just their ways of thinking themselves and viewing themselves in the world around them. And so just being able to help work with them to build their confidence and build their self-worth and self-esteem, and to just work with them so that they don't blame themselves for what they've been through, and work with them on identifying what their triggers are, what causes them to think about it, what causes them to grow anxious or upset. And some of the residential programs and outpatient counseling that we have are very trauma informed, and that have different modalities that are evidence-based that work with clients on working through this. But it's a long process. So the success stories that I give about clients who are holding down jobs or going back to school, this is months or years down the line. And you know, there's a long period of time where I think that they need to be able to focus just solely on themselves and healing, and hopefully we try to get them connected with programs where they have the ability to do that without having to worry about the everyday stresses of finances and things like that.
So I think one thing that is becoming apparent is that a human trafficking victim is not going to self-identify. You're not going to have somebody come up to you and say, please help me, I'm a victim of human trafficking. So what are those flags that the community should be aware of to be able to identify, even if they don't think that it's human trafficking, even if they are not sure, what they should be on the lookout for?
Sure, I'd like for both of us to answer, but I would just say that the whole nature, Camila, of the post-traumatic stress disorder, the trauma bonds, sometimes it's also referred to complex PTSD in the field. That whole nature is brainwashing, where they literally believe they deserve to be exploited. And that, you know, for one case that I can remember, she was being interviewed and said she had to meet a quota that sometimes looked at like 10 different, what they would call Johns or buyers a day. And she would not get a penny of it. She was often psychologically and even physically abused. And at the end of the interview, the officer said, are you okay with that? And she said, yes, I'm supposed to do that. And so that gives you a kind of a little glimpse of the trauma and the psychological brainwashing. And so it's just part of it's not simple at all.
Yeah. Anything to add?
Yes, for just kind of red flags and signs, I'd say paying attention to the appearance. If you see any untreated medical needs, because sometimes they're not allowed to go to the hospital or clinics to treat medical needs. If they look undernourished or malnourished, like as if they haven't eaten a lot of times they will be. One way of controlling is by being given drugs or alcohol, so that's a huge sign as well. And what they have available to them at the time, like who's holding their identification documents is a huge one. They'll use that as a way of control. Then just kind of their overall kind of demeanor. Are they, when you start asking them questions, do they get really nervous about it because they don't want to get in trouble or get someone else in trouble? And, you know, just making kind of the intentions clear that you're asking questions to be of help and not to try to get them in trouble. Because a lot of times they'll be coached to think that law enforcement are the bad guys, when in this case, you know, like they're really just trying to help. They've been told, oh, well, I'm going to get in trouble if I talk about this, or, you know, and just giving them that opportunity to reach out for help.
Yeah, I think in watching a documentary where they were interviewing one of the traffickers who was recruiting at one point at a mall, he said, if I go up to a girl and I look at her and I tell her, you have beautiful eyes, and she looks back at you and she says, well, thank you, he knows that that's not the person that he can traffic. But if he goes to the next girl and he looks at her and he tells her, you have beautiful eyes, and then she looks down and she says, oh, thank you very much, but I don't think so, I don't have pretty eyes, that is that vulnerability that we spoke about that they're looking for. So we've talked a lot about how to fight this problem. Now let's talk about prevention. How do we prevent this from happening in the community?
One of the wonderful accomplishments of the task force is we have a speakers bureau under our education subcommittee. We have over 40 speakers that can go out in the community, different expertise. Many of them are the chairs of the subcommittees. And so that is available as part of prevention. Through Florida Abolitionists, we have a new student program where we are going to the middle schools, high schools, and universities and doing online safety. Attorney General Pam Bondi really promoted that in the last year and a half. And so we want students, parents, and teachers to know that there are recruitment techniques that are being used on social networks, on websites, and on smartphone applications, and what to be aware of.
Okay, how about you, Stephanie? What advice would you give when it comes to prevention, especially for parents, parents who are concerned about their young children being trafficked? Because as we have discussed, it is happening here in town, it is happening at the schools, it is happening at the malls. So what should parents be aware of when it comes to prevention?
I would definitely agree with Tomas in saying that the online element is a huge recruiting factor. For instance, say if a trafficker wanted to recruit a female, well, it doesn't take very long to send out 100, 200 messages, and he only needs 1 or 2 people to reply. And, it's a shot in the dark, but that's, just how they're recruiting. And just telling parents to be aware of the internet use, the phone use, and also just passing on the message to their children and adolescents of just being encouraging. That I feel a lot of times traffickers use the recruitment technique of, oh, you're beautiful, I want to be your boyfriend, and just, teaching self-confidence and that they are beautiful and they have self-worth inherently without needing to be in a relationship, and just really encouraging them in that independent aspect.
All right, well, once again, thank you both very much for being here with us today. We have run out of time, but once again, thank you for being here and sharing this information with the community.
Pleasure.
The Conozca Sus Derechos show of the Hispanic Bar Association of Central Florida is dedicated to service and education of our community. We want to thank Orange TV for their assistance in bringing you this program. For further information, please visit our website, hbacf.com. Thank you for tuning in.